Howdy folks, Shell Presto here again. Today I've got a speed paint for you of Cascade, another of the lovely ladies of the Ascension Epoch. Well, lovely may not be the right word. Pretty, sure, but she's also abrasive and has more of a borderline punk look to her. But I like her regardless. So I started by drawing Cascade with pencils. I left in all my revisions because I find it pretty interesting. I used to just draw a figure and say, well, that's good enough. It's better than a lot of other people can draw, so decent is just fine. But I've really had to slow myself down over the past couple of years because to get really polished, fantastic artwork, you need to take a hard look at your art and notice when something doesn't look right, or looks correct, but doesn't quite fit the tone you're looking for, and then take the time to fix it. That's not saying that I'm at that fantastic level yet, but I want to get there, and I think most artists do. So I spend a lot of time erasing and getting her arms just right, to the point that I actually took a break after being frustrated with the one arm, and I took a photo of myself in the pose to make sure I was getting it right. I also erased her face at some point because the tilt of her head and the expression just didn't give off the pleased but slightly cocky mood I was going for. Cascade's dangerous even when she's in a good mood, so I wanted just a hint of that in there, even though she's just showing off and relaxing in this scene. I used my good old trusty microns to ink her. I'm not sure I have too much to say about inking. It's actually my least favorite stage of drawing because I'm pretty controlled and precise about it, and because, well, it rots when you screw up, because those lines are permanent. I think I make at least one inking mistake per drawing, and I'm lucky when it isn't a major one. Inking just isn't as loose or flowy as penciling or coloring, at least the way I do it. If you have any inking questions, I would be happy to address them in future videos if you leave a question in the comments. Then I colored her in Copic markers, touched up the shading with Prismacolor colored pencils, and added highlights in her electoos with Sakura gel pens. White for the highlights and white and metallic blue for the tattoos. Line art wise, this is pretty standard. The only thing I did that some folks may find out of the ordinary is that I stop inking the background once it gets a certain distance away. And for the closest trees, I colored them first. Then I put a thin line of ink around the outline of the trunk. I did that so that I wouldn't have to color in the lines. Sometimes it's a little easier to just draw with the marker and then put an ink line in. Not with precise things like people and foreground objects, but with backgrounds and nature things, I think it's a little easier. So once you get that far back, note that I don't ink the leaves or the furthest trees in the distance. I wanted them to fade into the darkness to give the impression that there's more trees back there, but it's night, so you can't see them. When you start to see the background, it's worth noting that it's actually based on a little stream that runs into a dam in a town near me. I love the way beat up, not well maintained structures look. They may not be as safe as they once were, but they have a lot of character. So I ended up drawing Cascade because I wanted to draw this background, and her character fits it perfectly. And that's not just because she can manipulate water. Cascade hails from Konoha in the Ascension Epoch. So in my and Mike's books, we made sure that major historical events, such as Martians invading around the year 1900 in the War of the Worlds, changes both the timeline and Earth's geography. Books or movies where something major happens in, say, the early 1900s before World War I or World War II, but then the world seems to spring right back into place for those wars to happen exactly as they happen in real life always sort of irked me. So the Ascension Epoch United States, well, they aren't united anymore. That being said, Kanawha is roughly equivalent to modern-day West Virginia, and that area with its small towns and mountains and weird happenings jives really well with the area I live in. Except there aren't enough cool, weird happenings where I live. Anyway, if there are woods to get lost in, Cascade's at home. Although you probably wouldn't realize it with how much she hops from city to city to terrorize the human populace. After all, she left the farm to join the GPRA, the Global Parahuman Revolutionary Army, a group of violent, superpowered radicals. They're out to make the world a better place for talents. By force. Aren't bad guys fun? Probably the most striking feature on Cascade are the electoos, which I add in at the end of the piece. They're fiber optic glowing tattoos, and they were a lot of fun to design. They're flowers, roses specifically, but with waves instead of leaves. So obviously she's running around with very distinct glowing tattoos. She's not too concerned with a secret identity. Also of note in this drawing, I tried to pick colors that had a bit of blue shift to them for everything, but the skin. And even then, I added a lot of purple in the shadows. Note, even the pink of the lips looks a little bit purple. I tinted all but the brightest highlight areas with BG000 Pale Aqua to really bring out that coolness of a moonlit night. So if you see me going over white areas with an aqua marker so light it hardly looks like it's doing anything, know that it really does serve a purpose, especially when viewing the piece up close and in person. I like to remind folks that this is a speed paint too. You can tell that my hand's going too fast for real time, obviously, but I like to let people know that it took me hours to draw this. There are lots of artists faster than me, but overall it's good to remember that quality art takes time. Adding up the times from my non-sped up footage, it took me about 7 hours total to draw this, from when I first put graphite to paper to start my initial pencil sketch, to when I lifted my gel pen from the final detail. Now, granted, I did a pretty detailed background too, but still, you're seeing all of this compressed into a much shorter time frame. I guess what I'm trying to get at is, don't fret if drawing takes you a long time. It takes me a long time too, and it takes a lot of people a long time. So I'm going to call this voiceover a wrap and let you just enjoy me drawing with some awesome music by Rolemusic. Rolemusic is a French chiptunes artist who manages to get a really smooth sound as opposed to the sort of blocky sound you expect from chiptunes out of his music on his album Pop Singles Compilation 2014. Rolemusic released the album Creative Commons by, or Attribution, so if you like the album, look him up, get it for free, and throw a couple of bucks his way if you like it. I like featuring Creative Commons work that allows reuse because we release our Ascension Epoch books under a CC by SA, or Attribution Share-alike license. If you've never heard of Creative Commons, you should check out the concept at creativecommons.org. And, as always, I invite you to check out my and my husband's books, which I illustrate and co-write, at ascensionepoch.com. Cascade appears in the East End Irregulars series, which so far includes After Dark and Dismal Tide. And as always, if you like this video, please show some love by liking, subscribing to the channel, or sharing it on social media. Most importantly, have an awesome day. Presto, over and out. So here's some sites from nearby Pennsylvania locations that just make me want to draw. And some of these have made it into past drawings over the years. Firstly, of course, there's the pictures from the creek that runs into the dam that I used for this drawing of Cascade. Then there's the good old woods everywhere. I have so many pictures in forests. Crystal Cave isn't too far away, and that place is all at once awesome, beautiful, and creepy. They'll turn out the lights on the tour there, and the thought of being stuck in there without a flashlight is absolutely terrifying. And then, of course, there's tons of old buildings in various states of disrepair. But my favorite part of middle of nowhere Pennsylvania architecture is the "why is that there" door. Oh, sure, I know the ones halfway underground lead to basements, but they still look a bit odd, especially when the stairs just jut out into the street or pavement, waiting for someone to fall into that weed-covered pit. But weirder still are the doors above ground. Sure, you can argue that there could be a staircase there, but there isn't. Or maybe it's supposed to be at the level of a flatbed truck. But then why are they single doors instead of double doors if they're for loading? I don't have any pictures on hand, but I've also seen them really high up, like second story or more. They remind me of Looney Tunes, where you run towards a door and open it politely, waiting for your pursuer to run through, or the video game Clock Tower, where you run right out of door to thin air, holding desperately to the doorknob, hoping your pursuer falls. Ah, small town Pennsylvania, how I love thee.